Hello. So I'm starting a little bit earlier. It's only 5:30 my time, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Midwest. Uh, Prayers to all those people suffering with the snow. I love snow. Wish we'd get some snow here. But being stuck in it on the highways, that would be so scary. Uh, yeah. Saw JLR's 6-minute stream about people being stuck in the snow on the highways in, was it Missouri or Kentucky or both? Now I can't remember. But I'm doing StreamYard because I was able to click on a certain button and find out how many hours I had left. I try not to give up when when I try to do something and it doesn't prevail the first time. Okay, so I am going to play some music by JVNA. It's really kind of cool. It's a dance and electric sort of retro. Is that the word? What's the other word? Where it's trance kind of music. It sounds similar to the stuff. Hi, Glitters and Gold. Thank you for being here. It sounds similar to the stuff when we would go to the club in Okinawa. Hi, Ann P. Hi there. Oh dear. I thought I saw you, Ann, in Leanie's, but your avatar was dark green. So maybe you use a different avatar over there, or maybe that's a different Ann P. Whoops. Fiddlesticks. Okay, now what? Oh, here it is. Okay, so here we go. This is JVNA, and I'm going to just listen to it with you guys. The songs are really short. I'm not going to be doing all this dancing, but you guys might feel like dancing when you hear some of it. It's interesting. It's just capital letters JVNA. Oh, you were in Leanie's. Okay. Maybe she just has different color for her StreamYards or something. I don't know. All right. So here we go with the first song. And then I'm going to read the very first chapter from my from my book. Okay. Sounds like a carnival, doesn't it? Oops. Oops. Oh, really, Glitters? You like Netflix? Gee, that's wonderful. Hi, Mary Jane. Boom. Please let me know if the sound is good. Thank you. Hi, Sherry. I thought the song was so pretty by JVNA. I'm trying to hit some of those notes. Hey, Dan the Berry Sports. Isn't that gorgeous? Last song was Past Life that I tried to come to. This is Stars. This is what I picked out last night for today. And there's one more. These are all pretty upbeat, not real chill. Boom! This is Mountain. Last one, and then I'm going to read. Hi, MSO426. Good to see you. This one's pretty too. Thank you. Oh, I liked that song. I heard him last night. I don't know, it was like 3 in the morning, and I was like, okay, these are the ones I'm going to choose. Because some of the other ones, the mood is sad, or even calm. And they're pretty, but they're just, a little too slow. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Um, when they're only that long, too, they're a little bit hard to dance to. You know what I mean? I mean, they're not, but they are. So, um, And I was up pretty late, so I slept in a little bit and got some things done. Was able to catch Leanie's live because she was on during the day. Was over there maybe 10 minutes and then gave my mom a phone call. Um, she has me, not call her room or the hospital, but her cell phone. I didn't hear from her yesterday. It was the weekend, but I talked to her the day before. And when I talked to her on, let's see, Saturday, they were draining her kidneys. So she will always give me any news if she has any. So that's what she told me. So I didn't want to like maybe wake her if she was trying to rest. So I said, well, I'll wait for you to call me. But then when I didn't hear from her by around 1 my time, 3 hers, um, yeah, because, Sherry's in Iowa too. Well, she's at the Mayo Clinic, my mom in Rochester, Minnesota, but it's the same time frame. But it went straight to voicemail. So I told her I'm thinking about her a lot. I'm hoping the lidocaine patch is helping for her pain, and then I'm really sorry this is happening to her. Um, she's a real good woman, not because she's my mother, for real. She just is. She's always seen the good in people. She's always been helpful. And people that are nurses or former nurses, that takes a special kind of person. Um, she always thought that I would make a good nurse. This is what she told me, and that's why I worked at the convalescent center, but I was a nurse's aide assistant. So I didn't have to do the heavy, thank you, Mary Jane. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't have to do the heavy lifting, and all of that. But I did help with everything else, and I did help with them when they needed me. Thanks, Anne. Thank you. So, I don't know. Like, I mean, I have my phone in here, and a little surprised she hasn't called back yet. But maybe she texted me. For some reason, I'm not getting notifications. Um, but maybe she was having tests run. I don't know. But also, if things took a turn for the worse, if you know what I mean, and she couldn't call me, her husband would. So, that's a good thing to know too. Her husband Steve would call me. Um okay, I'm taking a peek at something. Okay, so I'm going to read the copyright disclaimer. I'm excited about reading this book to you guys. It's not real long. It's not a hardcover book. It's a paperback, but it's a New York Times bestseller. And I like real stories. Of course, the names are changed and stuff, but I like real stuff. Just like on TV, I like reality shows the best. I always have. Copyright disclaimer. This video is for educational purpose only. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting. Scholarship and research fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Could be the weather too, yeah? Yeah, I mean, I hear Kentucky and Missouri, and of course, other places, and then all up the East Coast. Um, the East Coast. See, I always called the East Coast only New York, Vermont, Maine, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, that whole area, right? Not the southern eastern side. I always called that just the South. That's the South to me. So but I know that people down south kind of like to be considered the East, the Eastern Coast. I mean, which it is, like Carolina and all that, it's on the East side. But, you know, growing up in my teens and early 20s in Vermont, it's just, and New Jersey was the East Coast. But anyway, so I hope all those people are okay, the ones stranded on the highways and being spun around. And good grief, I seriously, I'm glad I don't drive. I'm just glad I don't drive. We have an incredible bus system in this town, and I used to take the bus, um, when my kids were babies. But then I would put that little, what is that? Not a booster seat, but a bike seat for the kids. And I actually biked my daughter to her preschool, um, every single day for preschool, which was, of course, 1 year. And my son, see, did he go to preschool? I don't know if my son even went. I'm just really, I mean, I should be able to remember, but I'm not remembering that. So he must not have. He must have just gone straight into kindergarten. But okay, so I read that. I'm going to read from this book, and we're on chapter 1. This book is by Carolyn Knapp, Knapp, Drinking a Love Story. And chapter 1 is love. Now, last night I read a couple of sentences to give people an idea of how she writes this book. And yeah, it's pretty beautifully done. So I'll just start from the beginning. I drank. I drank. Now, I hope I'm saying these words right in these foreign, writing or foreign words. I drank. I drank Fumé Blanc at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I drank double shots of Johnny Walker Black on the rocks at a dingy Chinese restaurant across the street from my office, and I drank at home. For a long time, I drank expensive red wine, and I learned to appreciate the subtle differences between a silky Merlot and a tart Cabernet Sauvignon, and a soft, earthy Beaucastel from the south of France. Probably Beaucastel, I'm not sure. But I never really cared about those nuances because honestly, they were beside the point. Meaning, right? Really doesn't really matter as long as it's alcohol. Toward the end, I kept 2 bottles of cognac in my house. The bottle for show, which I kept on the counter, and the real bottle, which I kept in the back of the cupboard beside an old toaster. The level of liquid in the show bottle was fairly consistent. Hi, Freeside. Hola. Decreasing by an inch or so, perhaps less, each week. The liquid in the real bottle disappeared quickly, sometimes within days. I was living alone at the time when I did this, but I did it anyway, and it didn't occur to me not to. It was always important to maintain appearances. Hi, Red-Headed Storm. Okay, so yeah, maintain appearances. When I used to drink and was having, some domestic situations with my daughter's father and stuff, I would hide a beer by the toaster, literally the toaster on the counter, kind of behind it, and I would down it because I just knew he was he was hypercritical, not critical, hypercritical, and I knew he'd find some fault with not enough of something or just have a problem, and I wanted to be able to let it roll off my shoulders and just not let the insults hurt me so much. And it wasn't every night or anything because honestly, he lived in his own apartment. He tried to live here, but he couldn't get on my lease because he had a what is it called now? A misdemeanor or something. And so I couldn't get him on. So he got his own place. And honestly, when he bothered, took the time to come over and be with me and his little girl, then he would. I think his medication made him tired, but he would constantly just miss times and miss whatever and would never even let me know ahead of time. He'd sleep through things to the point where I got a whole bunch of stickers, smiley stickers, and I said, "Here, this will help you. Just put a smiley sticker on this certain day and then set your alarm for that day." So it worked for a little while, but okay, so I drank when I was happy, and I drank when I was anxious, and I drank when I was bored, and I drank when I was depressed, which was often. I wanted to raid my parents' liquor cabinet the year my father was dying. He'd be in the back of their house in Cambridge, lying in the hospital bed in their bedroom, and I'd steal into the front hall bathroom and pull out a bottle of old Granddad that I'd hidden behind the toilet. It tasted vile. The bottle must have been 15 years old, but my father was dying very slowly and gradually from a brain tumor. So I drank it anyway, and it helped. My mother found that bottle empty that April, the day of my father's funeral. I'd thrown most of the others away, but I must have forgotten that one. And she discovered it stashed behind the toilet as she was cleaning the front bathroom for guests. I was sitting at the dining room table, and as she walked through the room, the bottle in her hand, she glared at me, a look of profound disappointment. So I lied. "That was before," I said, referring to a promise I'd made her 9 months before my father died. "2 drinks a day," I'd said, "no more than that. I promise I'll cut down." I'd made the promise on a Sunday, the previous July, in the midst of a pounding hangover. I'd been visiting my parents at their summer house in Martha's Vineyard, and I'd gotten so drunk the night before I almost passed out on the sofa, sitting right there next to my mother. I'd done the drinking in secret, of course, stealing off to my bedroom every 30 minutes or so to take a slug off a bottle of scotch I'd stashed in my bag, and I vaguely remember the end of the night, my words slurring when I tried to talk, my eyelids so droopy I had to strain to keep them open. I was usually more careful than that, careful to walk the line between being drunk enough and too drunk, careful to do most of the serious drinking at the very end of the night, after everyone else had gone to bed. But I slipped up that time, and my mother caught me. The next day, she asked me to take a walk with her on the beach, an unusual move for my mother, who requested a private audience only when she had something very serious to say. I remember it was a sunny morning, mid July, with a stiff breeze and hot light, and I remember a feeling of dread and contrition. I was hoping she wouldn't be mad at me. We made our way down the dirt path that led from our house to Menemsha Pond, a blue arc of water at the bottom of the hill, and then we walked for a while in silence. Finally, she said, "I need to talk to you. I'm very worried about your drinking." I said, "I know." I walked beside her, keeping my eyes on my feet in the sand, afraid that if I looked up, I'd bump too abruptly into a truth I didn't really want to see. I added softly, "I am too." I could tell from her tone that she wasn't angry, just worried, and I had to admit to her I was too, sort of. We walked some more. She said, "This is very serious. It's more serious than smoking." My mother was the sort of person who chose her words with the utmost care, and I understood that a wealth of meanings ran beneath that simple phrase, more serious than smoking. Smoking caused cancer, a disease that was killing my father, that had killed several women in her family, that would kill her just a few years later. Oh, good grief. All right, so her mother passes away a few years. I read this book, but it was about, I think it was about 13 years ago. She understood that drinking was more dangerous, and she understood why. Smoking could ruin my body. Drinking could ruin my mind and my future. It could eat its way through my life in exactly the same way a physical cancer eats its way through bones and blood and tissue, destroying everything. It really is serious, she said. I kept my head lowered. I know. And I meant it, at least just then. There are moments as an active alcoholic where you do know, where in a flash, clarity, you grasp that alcohol is the central problem, a kind of liquid glue that gums up all the internal gears and keeps you stuck. The pond was beautiful that day, rippled and sparkling, turning the sand a deep sienna where it lapped against the shore. And for an instant, I did know. I could see it. I was 33 and I was drinking way too much, and I was miserable, and there had to be a connection. My mother was such a gentle woman. She said, "What can I do to help you? I'll do anything I can." And that's when I made the promise. I looked out across the pond, not wanting to look her in the eyes. "I don't know," I said. "I know I have to deal with it." I told her I'd look into Alcoholics Anonymous. In the meantime, I'll cut down 2 drinks a day. No more than that, I promise. I'd meant it. That afternoon, I took the ferry from Martha's Vineyard to Woods Hole en route back to Boston where I lived, and I remember sitting there on the boat, vaguely nauseated, my head still aching from the night before. I wanted a beer, just one beer to help ease the headache, and I debated with myself about that for several long minutes. Shouldn't I prove to myself that I could go a day, just one simple day, without a drink? Shouldn't I? The 90-minute ride to Boston loomed ahead. The sky was clear with the sharp light of late afternoon, and people wearing windbreakers and sweatshirts and sunglasses lolled on the deck in canvas chairs, sipping Budweiser and Michelob Light from tall plastic cups. This book was written in 1996. Um, yeah. Hi, lunch lady. I had the beer, and then when I got back to my apartment, I had a little wine with dinner. Just a little, 2 glasses, but they were small ones, so I considered them half glasses and counted them as one. From that point on, though, I was always very careful around my mother. Careful not to drink more than 2 glasses of anything in front of her. Careful never to call her when I was drunk. But I didn't keep the promise. And that's how it works. Active alcoholics try, and active alcoholics fail. We make the promises and we really do try to stick with them, and we keep ignoring the fact that we can't do it. Keep rationalizing the 3rd drink or the 4th or the 5th. Just today. Bad day. I deserve a reward. I'll deal with it tomorrow. A few weeks after the walk with my mother, I read a book that mentioned a test people could take in order to determine whether or not they're alcoholics. The test involves setting limits, 3 drinks a day for 6 months, no more, no less, no variation, no matter what the circumstances. Someone dies, you still don't have more than 3. You get fired from your job, just 3. Weddings, funerals, celebrations, disasters, it doesn't matter. I can't even remember how many times I took that test. Dozens of times. I also can't remember consciously deciding to stray from the rule or to cheat, to have the 4th glass of wine, or to pour the 3 glasses in such enormous goblets that I might as well have had 6. I just couldn't do it. Alcohol had become too important. By the end, it was the single most important relationship in my life. A love story. Yes, this is a love story. It's about passion, sensual pleasure, deep pulls, lust, fears, yearning hungers. It's about needs so strong they're crippling. It's about saying goodbye to something you can't fathom living without. I loved the way drink made me feel, and I loved its special power of deflection, its ability to shift my focus away from my own awareness of self and onto something else. Something less painful than my own feelings. I loved the sounds of drink, the slide of a cork as it eased out of a wine bottle, the distinct glug glug of booze pouring into a glass, the clatter of ice cubes in a tumbler. I loved the rituals, the camaraderie of drinking with others, the warming, melting feelings of ease and courage it gave me. Our introduction was not dramatic. It wasn't love at first sight. I don't even remember my first taste of alcohol. The relationship developed gradually over many years, time punctuated by separations and reunions. Anyone who's ever shifted from general affection and enthusiasm for a lover to outright obsession knows what I mean. The relationship is just there, occupying a small corner of your heart, and then you wake up one morning and some indefinable tide has turned forever and you can't go back. You need it. It's a central part of who you are. I used to drink with a woman named Elaine, a next door neighbor of mine. I was in my 20s when we met, and she was in her late 40s, divorced and involved with a married man whom she could not give up. Elaine drank a lot, more than I did, and she drank especially hard when the relationship with the married man got rocky, which was often. She drank beer and vodka, and she'd call me up on bad nights and ask me to come over. The beer made her overweight, and the vodka made her sloppy, and she'd sit on her sofa with a bottle and cry, her face stained with tears and mascara. I used to sit there and think, whoa. I'd sympathize and listen and say all the things girlfriends are supposed to say, but inside I'd be shaking my head, knowing she was a wreck and knowing on some level that the booze made her that way, that the liquor fueled her obsession for the married man, fueled her tears, fueled her hopelessness, and an inability to change. But some small part of me, it got larger over the years, was always secretly relieved to see Elaine that way, a messy, drunks, and ugly thing. Particularly when the messy drunk's a woman, and I could compare myself to her and feel superiority and relief. I wasn't that bad. No way. I was that bad. And I wasn't that bad. I had lots of rules. I never drank in the morning, and I never drank at work. And except for an occasional mimosa or Bloody Mary at a weekend brunch, except for a glass of white wine, maybe two, with lunch on days when I didn't have to do too much in the afternoon, except for an occasional zip across the street from work to the Chinese restaurant with a colleague, I always abided by them. For a long time, I didn't even need rules. The drink was there, always just there. The way food's in the refrigerator and ice is in the freezer. In high school, the beer just appeared at parties, lugged over in cases by boys in denim jackets and Levi corduroys. In my parents' house, the scotch and the gin sat in a liquor cabinet to the left of the fireplace in the living room, and it just emerged every evening at cocktail hour. I never saw it run out, and I never saw it replenished either. It was just there. In college, of course, it was there all the time, in small, squat refrigerators in dorm rooms, in kegs at parties, in chilled draft glasses on tavern tabletops. And by the time I graduated, by the time I was free to buy alcohol and consume it where and when I wanted, drinking seemed as natural as breathing, an ordinary part of social convention, a simple prop. Are you guys enjoying this book at all? I'm kind of curious for anyone that's in chat still. Put a one in chat if you're kind of liking the way this is written. Maybe you can't relate to it though. I certainly can. Where you try to, thanks, Mary Jane. And listen, if you don't really like it, don't put a one in chat. You don't have to like everything I like, right? You can relate to Mary Jane. I don't know. I mean, well, I only know with hard drugs, being an outpatient and what I learned, the pull is absolutely I heard it was worse than alcohol. You would do anything for that high. And I kind of thought for years people were sick after, or I mean, were sick sometimes while they were on these hard drugs like heroin or meth. But I didn't know that when they weren't taking it, they were unbelievably sick. That I didn't know, and that I learned in outpatient. I was in an outpatient, I had to go a year through the CPS stuff, but they released me at 10 months because I was going to more meetings than I needed to. I was doing everything they asked, and I really wanted to stop. I wanted that kind of lifestyle to stop. And I think back, right, with the drinking age, yes, it messes with the brain itself. Alcohol is just as bad, if not worse. Alcohol detox can, yeah, and I didn't even know that until, I mean, I started partying when I was 16. The drinking age was 18 in Vermont in the 80s. And being honest, I did not know that detoxing from alcohol, you could die. So, I mean, I don't know, those times when I had acute alcohol poisoning and stuff, and I mean, we're not talking just a headache, right? We're talking where you absolutely can't stop vomiting, but bile is coming up, that kind of retching, where you honestly feel like you're gonna die. Um, but yeah, and I'd vow to myself, this is it. This is it. You're practically choking on your tongue. You're out, and I would go maybe 3 days, sometimes four. This is in my 20s. And then drink again, repeating the insanity. But it was the norm, right? You got all these college kids and this and that. I wish someone had told me that when you're offered a sweet drink, you can't just drink it. You can't suck it down because it's sweet and you can't taste the alcohol. I never knew. And I would suck them down. And then the room's either spinning or I'm out in the bushes trying to get up with my white pants on covered with grass stains or dirt or something. That happened at a party with 5 different shots in this drink. You know, must have did a lot of bending over while on that alcohol back then. Bending over. Are you talking sexually, Adam and E Proton? Oh no, you're talking throwing up. Um, yeah. I mean, and then your body would get, what is it? Not used to, what's the word? Anyway, used to it. Shots. I'm here. Hi, Sierra. Um, I do suppose, like, I mean, if I had kids in my 20s, I know I would have cut down or stopped. I know that because I didn't touch it in my 30s for 8 years while I was with my ex, Parker's dad. I didn't. Not one little time. Sexually? Goodness sakes. Mary Jane, dependent. Yes. All right, I'm gonna keep reading here. Still, I look in the mirror sometimes and I think, what happened? I have the CV of a model citizen or a gifted child, not a common drunk. Hometown, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Backyard of Harvard University. Education, Brown University, class of 81. Magna cum laude. Parents, esteemed psychoanalyst dad and artist mom, both devoted and insightful and keenly intelligent. In other words, nice person from a good upper middle class family. I look and I think, what happened? Of course, there is no simple answer. Trying to describe the process of becoming an alcoholic is like trying to describe air. It's too big and mysterious and pervasive to be defined. Alcohol is everywhere in your life, omnipresent, and you're both aware and unaware of it almost all the time. All you know is you die without it, and there is no simple reason why this happens, no single moment. No physiological event that pushes a heavy drinker across a concrete line into alcoholism. It's a slow, gradual, insidious, elusive becoming. My parents' house in Martha's Vineyard is in the town of Gayhead, on the westernmost side of the island, in a dry town. A 40-minute drive from the nearest liquor store or bar. When I was a teenager, our lack of proximity to alcohol was fine, a fact something I didn't notice. Then in my 20s, it became slightly questionable. I'd come for a weekend to visit my parents, and I'd assume my father would have gin for martinis and wine for dinner, and he would, and I'd be somewhat relieved without really knowing it. And then after I turned 30, it became more than questionable. It became a problem. This dry town of Martha's Vineyard, a 40-minute drive from the nearest liquor store. Somewhere inside, I acknowledged that this made me nervous. Somewhere inside, I'd become desperately aware that the last time I was at the house, there was only one bottle of wine for dinner. One bottle to share between 4 or 5 people, and that level of liquid in the gin bottle was dangerously low by the end of the weekend. I'd remember very clearly that I'd had to compensate for the lack of wine by returning to that gin bottle several times, surreptitiously, sneaking into the kitchen to top off my drink while the rest of the family sat outside on the porch. In some dark place, an anxiety about this festered. I didn't want to be trapped there again with this insufficient supply, but I didn't want to let on that I was anxious about the supply either. So I'd debate without even noticing the arguments and counter arguments circling in the back of my mind. Should I show up for the weekend with a case of wine on the pretext that I'd brought it there just to have it in the house? Should I forget about the whole thing and just hope someone else had restocked the liquor cabinet? Should I borrow the car and drive the 40 minutes to the liquor store, pretending to be off for a solo trek at the beach? In a back corner of my mind, I'd noticed that this question of what there was to drink in the house had become a big deal. And that fact would nag at me just a little bit, raising a tiny flag, a question about how much I seemed to need the alcohol. I thought one box was bad, says Adam and E Proton. Is that you? Is that you, Joe? This might be my ex. This really might be. Because for a while he was buying 1 boxes of uh, wine. All right. Let's see. I lost my spot. Okay. The questions would continue: what to do, how to do it, who'd notice, why didn't anyone else drink the way I did? And after a while, these voices would start to feel too big and too confusing and too overwhelming. And in the briefest instant, I'd just do it. I'd mentally wash my hands of the whole business, and I'd pick up a bottle of scotch the day before the trip, and I'd stash it in my weekend bag. There, problem solved. That, of course, is how an alcoholic starts not to notice it. Just this one time. That's how you put it to yourself. I'll just do it this one time. The same way a jealous woman might pick up the phone at midnight to see if her lover is home, or cruise slowly past his house to check his lights, promising herself that this is the last time. I know this is insane, but I'll only do it this once. I'll just bring the scotch this one time because I'm particularly stressed out this week and I just want to be able to have a scotch where and when I want it. Okay? It's no big deal. Just a little glass in my room before dinner so I don't have to steal into the kitchen and sneak one there. Just a little glass so I don't drink up any more of Dad's liquor. No big deal. It makes sense. And it would make sense. In a certain perverse way. There I'd be out on the porch in Martha's vineyard with my family, and I'd excuse myself for just a minute to go to the bathroom. Then on the way to the bathroom, I'd make a quick detour to my bedroom, and I'd pull the scotch out from the bag and unscrew the cap and take a long slug off the bottle and swallow. The liquor would burn going down, and the burn would feel good. It would feel warming and protective. It would feel like insurance. Yes, insurance. The scotch in my bag gave me a measure of safety. It let me sit at the table during dinner and not obsess through the whole meal about whether there was enough wine, whether anyone would notice how fast I slammed down my first glass, whether or how I could reach for the bottle to refill my glass without calling too much attention to myself. It let me know I'd taken care of when the need became too strong. When you love somebody or something, it's amazing how willing you are to overlook the flaws. Around that same time in my 30s, I started to notice that tiny blood vessels had burst all along my nose and cheeks. I started to dry heave in the mornings, driving to work in my car. A tremor in my hands developed, then grew worse, then persisted for longer periods, all day sometimes. I did my best to ignore all this. I struggled to ignore it. The way a woman hears coldness in a lover's voice and struggles, mightily and knowingly, to misread it. Wow. That was chapter 1, you guys. And I thought it would take me a lot longer to get through. But I'm going to read one more chapter. Double Life, chapter 2. I hobbled into the newspaper where I worked the Monday after Thanksgiving weekend, my knee swathed in a large white bandage. Marcia, the managing editor, saw me first. She said, "What happened to you?" I just rolled my eyes. "Oh, really stupid." I said I told her about racing around with the kids. I didn't mention that I was drunk, and she wouldn't have thought to ask. All right, so I'm going to quickly read the prologue, which is what this woman is talking about. This is for those of you that have missed it. This is what happened to this woman. And this is true story. It's just the names are changed. It happened this way. I fell in love, and then because the love was ruining everything I cared about, I had to fall out. This didn't happen easily or simply, but if I had to pinpoint it, I'd say the relationship started to fall apart the night I nearly killed my oldest friend's 2 daughters. I'd been visiting my friend Jennifer over Thanksgiving. So this is back to the Thanksgiving, that she's talking about in chapter, or that I'm reading in chapter 2. A few years ago, and we'd all gone for a walk after dinner, she and her husband and the 2 daughters and me. The kids were 5 and 9 years old, beautiful little blue-eyed girls with freckles and wide grins, and I'd been playing rambunctious friend of Mom's. I chased them around and hoisted them into the air, and then in a blur of supremely bad judgment, I dreamed up the double marsupial hold. I put the older girl, Elizabeth, on my back, piggyback, and then I picked up the younger one, Julia, and held her facing me, so that her arms were around my neck and her legs around my waist. I was sandwiched between them, holding 130 pounds of kid. Then I started running across the street, shouting like a sportscaster. It's the double marsupial hold. They've accomplished the double marsupial hold. And then I lost my balance. I flew forward, came crashing down, and I still believe it's a miracle that Julia's tiny 5-year-old skull wasn't the first thing to hit the pavement. Somehow I kept her in my arms and allowed my right leg to take the fall. And I remember hitting the ground and feeling something like a minor explosion in my knee. The kids were okay, but I ended up in the emergency room with a gash on my knee so deep the nurses could see my kneecap. This is the truth. I was extremely drunk that night and I put those kids in serious jeopardy. 3 months later, I quit drinking, beginning the long, slow process of disentangling myself from a deeply passionate, profoundly complex 20-year relationship with alcoholism. So she hobbled her way into the newspaper where I worked the Monday after Thanksgiving weekend, my knee swathed in a large white bandage. Marcia, the managing editor, saw me first. She said, "What happened to you?" I just rolled my eyes. "Oh, really stupid." I said I told her about racing around with the kids. I didn't mention that I was drunk, and she wouldn't have thought to ask. The phrase is a high-functioning alcoholic, smooth and ordered on the outside, roiling and chaotic and desperately secretive underneath, but not noticeably so, never noticeably so. I remember sitting down in my cubicle that morning, my leg propped upon a chair, and thinking, I wonder if she knows. I wonder if anyone can tell by looking at me that something is wrong. I used to wonder that a lot. That last year or two of drinking, something is different about me. I'd think sitting in an editorial meeting and looking around at everyone else, at their clear eyes and well rested expressions. Can anybody see it? The wondering itself made me anxious, chipping away at the edges of denial. The fact is, nobody would have known from looking. An outsider walking past my cubicle that morning would have seen a petite woman of 34 with long light brown hair pulled back in a barrette, neat and orderly looking. Closer inspection would have suggested a perfectionistic, polished exterior, a careful attention to detail, a young woman with well manicured nails and black leggings and Italian shoes, a daily list of things to do sitting on the desk, written in perfect print, several items already neatly ticked off. A workspace so compulsively tidy that one of my staff writers used to say you could fly a plane over my desk and it would look like a map of the Midwest. Everything at perfect right angles. Colleagues saw me as smart and introspective, a little reserved maybe, and a paragon of efficiency at work, organized, professional, and productive. I ran and edited the lifestyle section of the Boston Phoenix, a large alternative weekly newspaper, and I wrote a weekly column, one of the paper's most popular features, and I never missed a deadline, not once, not even when my parents were dying. When I finally went into rehab, I told everyone at work I was going off to a spa, 2 weeks of rest and relaxation and Swedish massage, and no one had any reason not to believe me. I hid it that well. Most high functioning alcoholics do. Most are in very good company too, and lots of it. Functioning alcoholics are everywhere, plugging away at jobs and raising families and standing alongside you in the grocery store. We're often professionals, doctors, lawyers, teachers, politicians, artists, therapists, stockbrokers, and architects. And part of what keeps us going, part of what allows us to ignore the fact that we're drunk every night and hungover every morning, is that we're so very different from the popular definition of a real drunk. Alcoholic is a nasty word. Several decades of education about the disease notwithstanding, Say it out loud, and chances are you still get the classic image of the falling down booze hound, an older person, usually male, staggering down the street and clutching a brown paper bag. A pathetic image, hopeless and depraved. Or ludicrous image, a man made funny and stupid by drink. Think of Dick Martin slurring his words on Laugh-In, or Otis, the happy drunk, on the Andy Griffith Show, a precursor to Dudley Moore's character in the Arthur movies. In fact, the low-bottom Skid Row bum is the exception, representing only 3 to 5% of the alcoholic population, a mere fraction. The vast majority of us are in far earlier stages of the disease. We're early and mid-stage alcoholics, and we function remarkably well in most aspects of our lives for many, many years. My friend Helena completed her PhD in biology while she was actively drinking. My friend Ginny rose up the ranks of a very competitive law firm. My friend Sarah founded and ran a well-known environmental advocacy group, sometimes as a way of reminding myself how hidden the symptoms and effects of alcoholism can be. I'll look around an AA meeting and tick off our collective accomplishments. That one was a vice president at a large financial institution when he bottomed out. That one was the head nurse in a cardiac intensive care unit. That one had his own architecture firm. That one his own economics research company. These are utterly typical examples. Strong, smart, capable people who kept drinking, who put off looking at the dozens of intangible ways alcohol was affecting their lives, precisely because they were strong, smart, and capable. In retrospect, a lot of the alcoholics I know are amazed at how much they accomplished in spite of themselves, how effectively they constructed and then hid behind facades of good health and productivity. At the time, they just got through, just hunkered down and worked and got through the days. Me too. I wrote a book during my last, most active year of alcoholism. I wrote several award-winning columns. I spent my days in a bustle of focused, highly concentrated activity, editing stories, working with designers, meeting with writers and editors, and only a very particular sort of person, probably another alcoholic, could have peered into that cubicle and realized that, in fact, I was clicking away at my computer with a pounding hangover or sitting there at the end of the day, my body screaming for a drink. Or more to the point, that my life was actually in shambles. By the time I hit bottom, I'd lost both my parents, my father to a brain tumor and my mother to metastatic breast cancer. I was involved with two men, unable to extricate myself from an enormously destructive relationship with an old boyfriend, Julian, and unable to fully involve myself in a more positive relationship with a new boyfriend, Michael. I was living with Michael, still seeing Julian, lying to both men about the other. I was drinking every night, drinking to get drunk, to obliterate. Perception versus reality. Outside versus inside. I never missed a day of work because of drinking, never called in sick, never called it quits and went home early because of a hangover. But inside, I was falling apart. The discrepancy was huge. On the outside, remarkably, I created an impression of searing honesty. Regular readers of my column had a sense of me as someone who was brutally direct about life's struggles. I wrote long, vivid columns about dealing with my parents' deaths, and I wrote eloquently about the long struggle with anorexia I'd gone through in my 20s, and I channeled boatloads of baggage into humor, into bemused and ironic columns about the young single life, about the perils of living alone, and obsessions with bad men, and confusion over what it meant to be a grown-up. My alter ego, the frequent subject of my column, was a tortured and hapless young woman in her 30s named Alice Kay, who lay in bed at the start of each story, literally writhing with anxiety, obsessing about men, chronically stuck in a rut. People at work were forever coming up to me on Thursdays, the day the paper came out, and saying things like, I can't believe how self revealing you are in your writing. And how does it feel to spill your guts like that every week? It was always clear to friends and colleagues that the line between me and Alice Kay was very thin, that I too felt stuck in a rut, that this character's angst was tied very closely to my own. What wasn't clear to colleagues, to me, was how closely linked alcohol was to all that angst, how much I clung to both of them. Once a reader wrote me and said, Let's hope you never settle down and get happy. What would you have to write about? Would your columns get all warm and fuzzy? I chuckled at that, but also took the questions fairly seriously. I think I knew on some level that the drinking and the depression were connected, but I also believed that the undercurrents of despair were somehow central to my work, that drink was an occupational hazard, part of the writer's territory. Tennessee Williams said that he never wrote without first drinking wine. William Styron used liquor, and often, not to help him write, but to help him think. A means, he writes, of letting his mind conceive visions that the unaltered, sober brain has no access to. I identified with that. I identified with legions of drinking writers, Carson McCullers, Dylan Thomas, Dorothy Parker, Thomas Wolfe, Eugene O'Neill, William Faulkner, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, Theodore Rothke, and Jack London. Wow, that might be my mom. Let me see. That was interesting. It was not my mom, but she's probably asleep. It's like 8:30 over there. It's only 6:30 here. That was actually a reminder for my son's appointment. And all I had to do was hit the one. Okay. Drinking seemed like a part of the turf to me, and there was a hard edged glamour to writers like that I found deeply attractive. These were dark and tortured souls, artists, people who lived life on a deeper plane than the rest, some key level. But even if they saw me stagger a bit or heard me start talking in a voice just a shade louder than normal, most people wouldn't have looked at me and said, drunk. Mostly I got loaded quietly, politely. It was something that took place in my own head. Superficially, I almost amassed plenty of evidence to suggest I was safe, way over on the non alcoholic side of the population. If you knew me well enough, you could spot a little addictive behavior around the edges. Too many cigarettes, too much coffee, a rather obsessive attitude toward the New York Times crossword puzzle. But nothing out of line, nothing problematic. Most of the time, the public persona was healthy and sociable. I exercised madly. I sat at my desk and ate healthy, low fat foods for lunch. I had friends and admiring colleagues, a classy little apartment downtown, a casual chic wardrobe, a good shrink. So there you go, no problem. Most of the time, that's how I saw it too. Alcoholism, after all, is a progressive illness. It sneaks up on you so subtly, so insidiously, that you honestly don't know you're falling into its grip until long after the fact. If you charted my drinking on a graph, you would have seen it creep up very gradually over a long period of years, and you would have seen a host of social factors supporting its rise. Conveniently enough, my 20s coincided with the 1980s, the decade of excess, If the line on my drinking graph began to creep upward and intake and frequency rising, it did so culturally as well. I had plenty of company. I moved to Boston in the mid 80s when I was 25, right around the time fancy restaurants with elaborate wine lists began cropping up all over the city. Everyone drank, or so it seemed, and it seemed utterly normal to pass a whole evening in a restaurant or a bar, ordering a third or fourth or fifth bottle of Merlot for the table. Let's go get a drink. Want to meet for a drink? Let's talk about it over drinks. Those were standard phrases in my circle. The line of my graph probably took a sharp rise around my 30th birthday, right around the time it dipped everywhere else, the early 90s, when everyone quit smoking and turned abstemious. The culture swung in a new direction, and I didn't swing with it. And I remember being conscious of that, aware that all of a sudden it was getting chic to stand around at a party and drink Perrier. Perrier? I'd stand there clutching my wine glass, trying to scope out the two or three other people in the room who might be sneaking a cigarette in a corner and regard this new restraint with a cynical eye. What a stupid trend. What fun is this? But alcoholics are masters of denial, and I managed to keep whatever worries I harbored about my own drinking nicely compartmentalized, stashed away on the same shelf in my cubicle where I kept my growing collection of books about addiction. So I drink a little too much. It's not really a problem. I said that to myself often, and I meant it. Real alcoholics drank themselves straight out of jobs. They got loaded at lunch and never came back to the office. They were so hungover they couldn't get to work in the first place. They stashed gin in their desks and received repeated warnings about their failing job performance. And they were finally fired. I wasn't like that, not in the least. I also had a long list of reasons to drink, a growing list. No one would have begrudged me that. Two major losses in the space of 2 years, a stressful job, deadlines, responsibilities, a messy romantic life, ambivalent and confused. So I drink a little too much. It's situational. I deserve it. I said that to myself too, with increasing conviction. Stress, depression, an exceptionally bad day or week or month, too much going on, need a little relief, deserve it. That's classic logic among functioning alcoholics. Over time, the drink itself becomes the reward, the great compensation for our ability to keep it all together during the day and to keep it all together so well. A drinker I know named Mitch says he developed an amazing tolerance for pain during his drinking days. He's a software designer, and he could sit in his office and work for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours in a row without a break. Just work and work and work as long as he knew he could have that drink at the end, as long as he knew the reward was waiting. Me too. I could sit at that computer and crank out words from dawn to dusk. And I always liked drinking best after a really hard, solid day at the desk, a day of blood, sweat on the pages. I'd earned it. Times like that, the tension and anxiety I'd feel at the end of the day, the feeling that every one of my cells was crying out for a glass of wine, seemed justifiable and easily explained, a direct result of the daily expenditure of energy. And so the drink seemed justifiable too. God, I need a drink. Lots of people say that at the end of a long, hard day. Even in the abstemious 90s, they say it. Mary Jane, you're so funny. Yeah. I mean, and who wanted just one? Or who wants just one or two? And then once I'd ever have four, I'd always want another because I'm feeling so good. When I drink. Oh, when I used to drink, I mean. Okay, where am I? High level functioning stands in the alcoholic's path like a huge road sign, flashing the message that everything is under control. You're cranking away at work and getting promotions and making money and never missing a deadline. No alcoholics here. It's not possible. Toward the end of my drinking, it would occur to me that my professional life managed to move forward precisely because it was the one area in my life where I never got drunk. Even with an occasional hangover, I was able to grow, able to see my mistakes and learn from them, able to gauge my own limits and to hone my understanding of where further work needed to be done. My vision didn't get muddied in the office in quite the same way it did in my personal life. And it was the one rule I held fast to: no drinking on the job. That's not uncommon among high functioning alcoholics. Drinkers like me tend to expend vast amounts of energy protecting our professional lives, maintaining the illusion that everything is, in fact, just fine. It's part of what keeps us going. But I began to worry in the last 6 months of my drinking. I began to see myself plotting more, planning my schedule around drinking in more deliberate ways. I wrote a weekly column and I'd think to myself, okay, Wednesday won't be too busy, so I can write all day Wednesday, which means I can't get too drunk on Tuesday. I had the feeling that I was working on my most creative efforts into the margins of things, struggling to make time for them, and then scared. Oh, and that scared me. A month or so before I finally quit, I heard Pete Hamill interviewed on National Public Radio, his memoir, A Drinking Life. Pete Hamill had just come out, and the interviewer asked if his drinking had ever affected his work. Hamill thought for a minute, then said that after a while he got the feeling that he was squeezing his talent through a tube of toothpaste, that his focus and concentration and feeling of literacy all seemed more strained and constricted. I shuddered hearing that because I was beginning to feel the same way. One day, I don't remember exactly when, this sort of thing happened all the time. I went into the ladies' room at work at 5 or 6 o'clock and looked at myself in the mirror. I'd been hungover all day, but had worked through it all morning. And when the headache hadn't gone away by noon, I left the office and went to get some exercise. That's a pretty common strategy among alcoholic drinkers. Sweat away the hangover. And I exercised a lot. I'd taken up sculling on the Charles River, and I went out that day and rowed hard for an hour, 6 miles. Toward the end, the wind picked up and the water got choppy, and I flailed along in my little boat, a long, precarious thing about 12 inches wide and 21 feet long, thinking I must be nuts. There I was, sweaty and hungover, and literally trying to muscle my body into a different state. It felt like self-punishment, and in a way, I guess it was. I'd returned to work that afternoon, gotten some writing done, then started to get ready to leave. My reflection in the mirror looked awful. My skin was pale, my face was drawn, I had large dark circles under my eyes, I had on a scoop neck sweater, and I could see little burst blood vessels all over my chest, red marks that looked like the beginnings of a rash. My twin sister, Becca, a doctor, would see those periodically and tell me she thought they were alcohol related. And I always thought, nonsense, they're from too much sun, back when I was younger. In any event, I looked like hell, and somewhere inside I understood that if I kept this up, kept drinking and working and flailing around like this, I'd die slowly, but literally kill myself. The truth gnaws at you. In periodic flashes like that, I'd be painfully aware that I was living badly, just plain living wrong. But I refused to completely acknowledge or act on that awareness. So the feeling just festered inside like a tumor, gradually eating away at my sense of dignity. You know, and you don't know. You know, and you won't know. And as long as the outside of your life remain intact, your job and your professional persona, it's very hard to accept that the insides, the pieces of you that have to do with integrity and self-esteem, are slowly rotting away. That was such a typical day and such a typical moment of insight, a feeling that surfaces in a second, then gets buried just as fast. I splashed some water on my face, put on some lipstick and some blush, and went back out to the newsroom. Hey, I said to a reporter named Mark, want to grab a drink across the street? Across the street meant the Aku Aku Lounge, which was my favorite bar at the end, exactly 27 steps away from the office, 22 if you cross the street really fast. The Aku is actually a Chinese restaurant, but the right half of the space was occupied by a bar, and everybody from work drank there, hunkered over tables on pink vinyl covered chairs. The room was dark, the primary light coming from votive candles in dark red bowl shaped glass candle holders. And it was tacky beyond belief. We'd sit at a table and make fun of the neon murals that decorated two sides of the room, neon Polynesian themes depicting active volcanoes and rivers with bamboo rafts. Ridiculous. Some people drank beer at the Aku, but the real drinkers ordered Johnny Walker Black on the rocks, which they served in glasses as big as goblets. A hefty 2 shots for 2.25, one of the best bargains in town. Some professions seem to invite a lot of drinking, at least in the public mind. Along with the angst ridden artist or writer, there's the hard drinking cop or detective who nearly lost the battle with booze. Captain Furillo on Hill Street Blues, Furillo on Hill Street Blues, or the protagonists of mystery novels by James Lee Burke and Lawrence Block. There's the gin guzzling salesman like Jack Lemmon in the days of Wine and Roses, and the over the top high stakes gambler of high finance, like the Michael Keaton character in Clean and Sober. These are men's men, and with rare exceptions, they're always men, and drink always seemed to be like part of their tough guy territory, their world, their persona. And of course, there are journalists. Pete Hamill epitomized the hard drinking reporter, and reading his memoir, you can see how naturally and easily he was drawn to drink. You can see him covering fires and murders for the New York Post, hunched over a bar with a source, hoisting a cold beer. Okay. Hoisting a cold beer before returning to his typewriter to pound off a good, clean story. You can understand the good times, the role alcohol played, Hamill getting blasted in a beer hall in Brussels, drinking with American paratroopers, and Hamill interviewing John Wayne over glasses of rum in Barcelona Bay, and Hamill drinking beer with the mariachis in the Plaza Garibaldi. You can feel it, the heady, exuberant camaraderie of men drinking with men. None of my colleagues was as tough or hard boiled as Pete Hamill, and neither was the kind of drinking we did at the Aku, but it felt earned in the same way. It had a Lou Grant feel, the group of us trooping in after a long day in the office, a handful of us gathering at a table, carping about our jobs and smoking cigarettes, letting the tension of the day ease out of our bones. The place was an exercise in sensory overload. A jukebox blared and a Pac-Man table beeped and hummed, and a giant video screen suspended over one side of the bar showed movies, usually with the volume up way too loud. For some reason, I liked all the competing noises. After a while, someone would usually force the bartender to turn down the volume on the movie or turn it off altogether, and we'd turn our attention to the TV on the other side. I liked that too, the routine of it. You could sit back and watch the news or Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy after the news, and that way you could float in and out of whatever conversation happened to be going on at the table. The atmosphere was easy and collegial, and you could order 6 drinks in a row there without raising an eyebrow. You want one mo? The waitress was a small boned Asian woman who didn't speak English very well, and that was pretty much the only question she ever asked. One mo. Okay. They loved us at the Aku, the waitress and the bartenders, because we'd sit for hours and we always left big tips. Seeing me in the Aku, nobody would have known this was a place I merely warmed up. Most of the time, I'd only stay there for a drink or two, and then off I'd go.
Gotta run, I'd say, or I'm out of here. Then I'd grab my bag and my coat, scoot off into the night, off to my busy life, or so it seemed. At the end, I'd become so good at compartmentalizing my drinking that nobody had a clear sense of my true intake, including me half the time. A drink or two at the Aku with work friends, then dinner at a restaurant with someone else, 3 or 4 glasses of wine with the meal, perhaps a glass of brandy afterward, then home where the bottle of cognac lurked beneath the counter and a bottle of white wine always stood in the refrigerator, cold and dewy and waiting. I was rarely conscious of this, rarely conscious of how much planning went into the whens and wheres and with whoms of all that drinking. It was just a drink here and a drink there, so available, so very easy. The year my father was dying, I'd go to the Aku after work almost every day and have 2 Johnnie Walker Blacks before going over to the house to see him. The bar was a retreat, a place to hide and fuel up for something difficult. But I started noticing that year that it was getting harder to find a regular group stationed at the Aku, a reliable drinking crew. Several of my drinking companions had gotten married or had kids, so they went straight home after work. Others had moved on to other jobs. The daily trek across the street began to seem like a less absolute occurrence, as though it had slipped a notch or two on the office priority list. This is a fairly common experience for drinkers. You look up one day and realize you're the only one left in the bar. 1.5 pages, and I'll be done with this chapter. So sometimes I'd go to the Aku by myself, sit at the bar, and have a drink alone. I usually tried to look busy and goal oriented at those times. I'd bring a notebook and make a list of things to do, or I'd check my watch every 5 minutes as though I were waiting for someone who was late. But in fact, I'd be totally focused on the drink, melting into the feeling of the scotch going down, and I'd feel relieved at the solitude, perched there out in the open and hiding at the same time. Another woman, I'm going to comment right there. When I used to go out well, in my 40s, it was once in a blue moon because my daughter was um, very, very small and would be here with her dad. And, or no, it was when she was a little older. Yeah, well, she was 4. So it's because we broke up when my daughter was 5. And it truly wasn't often. I'm being honest. It was like twice that whole year. So it wasn't every week, it wasn't every other month, it wasn't holidays. It was 2 times when things were just real shitty. And he was mad because there wasn't enough ranch dressing. And I had absolutely had it. And I actually took the plate. I didn't throw it at him. I knew better, but I threw it. It was glass down at the table. Um, and then when he was in the bathroom or something, I dipped out. I didn't even tell him. I remember that. And then another time, I don't remember what led up to it. But I just needed to get away and I felt like I needed to drink. And it wasn't to go meet another man or anything like that because I really was in love with her dad. Um, I mean, things were good except for his hypercriticalness. And 2 years into our relationship of 8 years, or just shy of 8 years, he found out he was bipolar. So I excused, right, a lot of his hypercritical and complaining and freaking out. And um, I said this story once. We were trying to get for my son one of those, what are they called? Arcade games in the back seat from a Goodwill. And it was a real cute green and black um,
I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't fitting right. I mean, it fit, but you had to push it in. Well, he was getting really, really mad, and um, he I walked into the store to get some help or something, and he threw my purse at my stomach so hard. I mean, it was just killing me. And a bus driver saw this, literally stopped the bus with people on it. Like it was that much of a scene, and said, "Are you okay?" And I probably lied, and said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he gave the driver, which was a woman, the finger. So, I started documenting. Um, I got my ducks in a row in case he'd ever try to take my daughter from me. I knew all these different domestic violence incidences would keep that from happening, just like the time when she was crying in the back seat. I mentioned this once before. The sun was in her eyes, and I was trying to move move the window, kind of cover up blind thing in the back, and I undid my belt, and he was furious. And we're going really fast down like this road, um not a highway, but a good clip of a road, and he slams on the brakes, and I on purpose, and I ended up in his lap, hitting my head on his window on his side, so the force of it, and then ending up back right on the stick shift really hard. And I was screaming. I was so upset. And I mean, I could have gone through the glass. It was bad. And my daughter was bawling. And so I screamed, "Pull over, pull over." And he did. And I took my daughter out, and somebody was driving by and called the police. And yeah, so I mean, that's just two out of many. And oh, yeah. Did you get custody? Was that like it was in your favor? Because that's the thing. Someone told me that even things that are written on calendars or journals, you just need to put the date on there. You don't even have to have the time. Can be used in courts, restraining orders, custody things. Yeah. So when they saw all this for those 3 months that I didn't have her in 2011, um, and I didn't go out or anything. I just hadn't eaten, and I had taken my Zoloft, which can up the feeling of alcohol and all that, and had some beers before I picked her up this one day on a Tuesday, and was in a blackout. And my neighbor called the police, and they took my daughter, and that's how CPS got involved. And it sucked. It was pure hell. And I had to call early every morning, and to find out if I had to pee in a cup, and what my color was, and this and that and the other thing. And the social worker didn't like me, and because I didn't have any like real good regular income. um and I had help, by well, I mean, obviously, the father, but he was gone. Now, at this point, he was in Colorado. So, really, he wasn't sending me anything. That's right. He wasn't even with me. He was with his new girlfriend and their two little girls at this point. But anyway, yeah, yeah. Well, they wanted him to take parenting classes because he got on the phone from Colorado like he's this caring father. I mean, this is why, you guys, even today at her age of 20, she hung out with him and did e-biking and stuff last summer, and then the summer before. This summer one time, the summer before two times. But because he was impatient with her, and um wasn't waiting up for her when she was off the e-bike that she had borrowed and he was still on his and she was on a regular one. She was hurt. She doesn't want to hang out. Then she says things to me like, he doesn't call me, he doesn't love me. And I always have told her this. I've never wavered in this one time, no matter what age she is. I'm like, he does love you. He just doesn't really know how to show it. He's probably waiting for you to call him. This was even a couple of months ago. And I said, so, you want to see him, you probably need to call him. I did say that. And because, she's 20 now. And if she wants a relationship with her dad, she can have it and she should have it. But she didn't want to call him. I'm not going to make her. I'm just not. And so it's, if you're not in your kids' lives, don't expect them to really be dying to see you later on. You know what I mean? I mean, he was sort of from her being born to the age of 5, but not so much, you know. So yeah. All right. So anyway, in the CPS thing, he had to take parenting classes. That's all he had to do. And they probably would have literally, for a little bit of time there, maybe anyway. Well, no, because I asked for my lawyer to put in the writing, I don't want her traveling alone by airplane. And then he mentioned bus. And I said, no, she was 7 then. I said to the lawyer, please put in there that I do not. And so she did. She said, under the age 10, she didn't have to fly or travel alone. I was so flippin' relieved. I can't even tell you the thought of her being all the way in Colorado at the age of 7. I missed her so much. I cried every night. I bawled my eyes out when I left the little meeting, the CPS meeting, but I couldn't show, I couldn't hardly show sadness when I had my visit with her. I had to act like everything was fine. And I said this before, but one time I was holding her and we were rocking in a chair and they can watch us through the glass and hear everything we say. And I said under my breath, um, I said, don't worry, I'm going to get you back. You're going to, come home to me or whatever. And of course, they didn't interrupt our visit, but I got a talking to. And I was surprised. They were like, you're not supposed to say those things. We told you in the guidelines, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it made me mad, but I didn't act mad. I just said, okay, okay, I promise I'll never do that again. I was scared. You're dealing with the state. The state. I had to, I, it was like, I think now my memory isn't as good, especially my part time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, you show tears? Forget it. They'll take your visits away, they'll limit them. So, yeah. And there was this woman that drove in from another county, uh, so that I got to see her 1 hour a week. 1 hour a week. That's like nothing. But this lady drove in and said, if you'd like to see her twice a week for half an hour, I'd be willing to do that for you. She worked with them. I can't even remember her name. And I said, yes, yes. And even though the visit wasn't as long, it was twice a week. So, yeah. And, we still talk about it. We talked about it around the holidays. She got choked up. It's like now that she's older, like I thought as she got older, she'd forget more and it wouldn't be so emotional for her. She gets choked up and she's like, I thought you were dead. Like this was just around like, and I said, That? I said, you thought that, but you were seeing me. I know, but when they took me and then they wouldn't even let me talk to you, I thought you had died. And I'm like, oh my gosh. She said, I cried every night, Mom. And I was, so we were holding each other, bawling, just like 13 years ago. But I was worried that she was going to have abandonment issues. And I mean, it doesn't seem like she does. She might, feel that way about her dad. I'm not sure, but she's really smart. I'm not saying that 'cause she's my daughter. She is. Shaylin is very, very smart to the point where, and I think growing up with a brother that has mental issues, I've told her, I'm like, you should go into, like, she can read people really well and empathize and know what they're feeling without them being able to articulate it, that kind of thing. And I'm like, maybe you should be a therapist or something. And she thought about that for a while, but I don't know. She's just, trying to find work right now. So, yeah. So, anyway, her dad, Mike, never took parenting classes. All he had to do was take some parenting classes, and he didn't. And honestly, I was so relieved and so glad. And she was with a foster family, and we're still friends to this day. They're really nice people. They're from a policeman family, and the kids welcomed her right in there, and they went to church, and she went to Lake Tahoe. And that scared me to death because I was like, oh my gosh, is she going to make the trip? Are they going to keep their eye on her every single second on that beach? But there was nothing I could do. But we all became so close, and they were such a loving family that even after I got her back 3 months later, because I took her from me September 21st, and I got her back December 13th. And she went to Lake Tahoe again with them. Yeah. Hi, Moonlight Soul Path. Hey, everyone. Oh, good grief. That's the other thing. I do believe there's corrupt, and not minor, majorly corrupt child protective order places. Do you know what I mean? They drop the ball and children get hurt. They run out of having enough people working. Um, oh God. Oh, good grief. I just, and I've heard stories where some of these judges for money will sell people's children and babies, and I hope to God not in this town. I mean, I am in Washington State. I'm a couple hours from Seattle, but it was really scary. I believe, okay, I'm 80% on this. They said you can take this to court and there'll be a trial to get her back sooner, my lawyer said, or you can sign her over to the state, and because you have no priors, you're not a felon, you don't have any misdemeanors, I don't have a traffic ticket. I had nothing, 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 nothing from my past. My female lawyer said, you'll get her back. I said, well, they're telling me it's going to be in a month. And she said, well, everything takes time. Well, boy, was she right. Every little thing took 2 whole weeks to wait for. I had no idea. I figured it'd be a week, the most 4 days. No, 2 weeks for the guardian ad litem to show up, 2 weeks for a hearing in front of a judge, 2 weeks to set up visits with the social work. I mean, it was just so the 3 months felt like 6 months, but we survived it. We did it. I remember feeling great shame and embarrassment telling my mother about it, but she was sweet. I couldn't believe it. She never said, "Oh, Megan," or anything like that. She was like, "Well, you got to buck up and do what you got to do. You'll get her back." That's what my mom said to me on the phone. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, I enjoyed going to meetings, and we had to go to 8 a week. I went to close to 20 a week. I did. I mean, I was, or no, not that many, two, about 15 a week, three on the weekends in the same day, and, afternoon and then evening and all this. I didn't miss a beat. My outpatient, it was pouring rain, and I had on snow pants, my jacket, of course, and I rode my bicycle up that dang steep hill, um, 5 blocks straight up a hill. I was so exhausted, but I made it to the top. I was 48, 49, 50. I was 49ish then. So, I hadn't had my stroke yet or anything, but other people are getting off the bus or getting out of their white cars with their coffees, from Starbucks, and they're sitting there all dry and warm, and I look like a drenched rat, and I didn't care. I didn't care. My hair was long. I shook it out. I took off my wet coat, I remember, and my scarf, and of course, I had jeans on under the sweatpants. I take those off, put them in a pile in the chair right next to me. I didn't care. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing the little crafts. I enjoyed learning about alcoholism, and I was ready. Um, Me and one other lady were the oldest ones in our outpatient group. All the women, and I was in a woman's group, which was nice. You don't have to worry about a man giving you the eye, or maybe you think someone's cute or whatever, and you could share openly or felt like you could. But yeah, she was like 51 and I was 48 or something, and all the other women were, I mean, I'm really not kidding, 20s, 30s, and just a couple in their 40s. They had a day where you could bring in your babies and your children. Now the children were, in school, but the babies were there. And there were a couple of women. I saw their babies. I can't remember their names, but they lost those babies. I mean, you know, I remember sitting there thinking this pretty often, not in a smug way, but a relieved way, going, man, I'm so glad I'm not an alcoholic and a drug abuser. You know, it's like alcohol is hard enough, to say you're never going to drink again. I mean, they say if you want to find out if you're an alcoholic, this is what Alcoholics Anonymous says. They say go without a single drink of any kind of alcohol for 90 days, not 30, 90. See if you can do it. Not many people can. I couldn't. All right. Anyway, I need to get back to this book. So okay, so this lady, right? Sometimes I'd go to the Aku by myself, sit at the bar, and I'd have a drink alone.
I usually try to look busy and goal oriented at those things. I'd bring a notebook, make a list of things to do, or I'd check my watch every 5 minutes as though I were waiting for someone who was late. I actually did that a few times. Especially if a guy, was kind of drunk at the bar I was sitting at and I'm out by myself, I'm not with my girlfriends. I didn't want them to I mean, I was up front. If someone wanted to buy me a drink, and that can happen pretty darn often, you guys, when you're a woman and you go out by yourself. Um, I'd tell them straight up, well, yeah, you can do that if you'd like, but I am waiting for someone to arrive or something, which is a lie, but I didn't want to feel stupid. Um, okay. Purged, open. Another woman, someone I didn't know, used to sit alone at the bar too. According to the bartender, she came in every evening at about 5, and she sat at the same bar stool, and she drank gin and watched TV. She was always there, and I gather she always stayed until closing. I spoke to her only once in the ladies' room on a day when she'd apparently quit her job. She kind of reeled in there, very drunk, and slurred something about quitting that fucking place, those fucking losers. I was washing my hands and I just looked at her. She stared back at me and said, "Do you know what I mean? Am I making myself clear?" I had no idea what she was talking about, so I just smiled and said, "Oh, yes, absolutely." Then sidled out of the ladies' room and went back to my table. She was a very reassuring presence to me, this strange woman at the Aku, so obviously a drunk. When a group of us sat at a table near her bar stool, we'd glance over at her once in a while and whistle softly. What a life, huh? She was far worse than my friend Elaine and far, far worse than me. And so she was very helpful to me for a very long time, symbolizing not what I feared I might become, but what for the moment I wasn't. My drinking was so social by comparison, so normal, wasn't it? I can't say for sure when the drinking shifted from normal to necessary. Maybe the year my father got sick, maybe before that. At some point, I began to notice how edgy I'd start to get every afternoon around 4 or 5 o'clock, and a small part of me began to observe the way I responded. I'd get up from my desk and wander around the office until I found someone who looked about ready to wrap up for the day. I forced a tone of nonchalance. "Any interest in a quick drink at a coup? How about a quick drink?" It was always a quick drink, as if I had things to do, places to rush off to afterward. I was conscious of this, conscious of the feeling of need behind the words, but I managed to ignore this for a long time. I suppose a part of me meant it. Just a quick drink, no big deal. The need and its intensity was a secret I kept from everybody, myself included. Oh, Lord. Okay. So I read 2 chapters, you guys. Chapter 3 is called Destiny, and that'll be tomorrow. Um, okay, what did you write here? Oh, good. Yeah, oops. Yeah. Oh, 30 days. Nope, she was the same. I hope she realizes now. I can't wait to hear the rest. That makes me feel good. Even if one person or two or three or a few in the bushes, if this story or this love story of drinking, you can, if it resonates with you, then that's fantastic, because it's not necessarily right. An addiction's an addiction. It can be anything, right? Eating, drinking, drugging, sexing, what other thing? Shopping. So, it's all how we try to rationalize things in our mind. What I learned
which I never ever knew my whole life, is that it really is a mind fuck when you're in it. It's such a mental obsession. And what's nice about AA is when you find other things and other people and a place to go where you don't have to do anything. You don't have to talk. You don't have to. Hi, Pink Peony. Thank you. Oh, thanks so much. You guys gonna make me cry. I want to help even one person. Because you can feel pretty without drinking. You can go to a party and talk. The other thing is, when everyone's drinking like that at things, people don't notice if you're not drinking. I mean, you could get a soda, no one would know. They're getting so wasted anyway. And half the people drink before they even go to parties. I was one of them. I always felt like I had to fit in. And I never knew I had anxiety, even. I never knew it till I stopped drinking. And I can honestly say I love myself today. If I was drinking, thank you, Stardust, so much. If I was drinking, do you think I'd be able to handle all this weird cyberbullying? Hell no. If I didn't learn that addiction is addiction is addiction, do you honestly think I wouldn't be smoking some pot on here and not drinking? I don't have to do anything. And even when people say, oh, she was drunk, she had to have been drunk. She was so hyper on blah, 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 whatever. I know in my gut and my heart, I'm not. I'm sober, totally sober. And what's really cool is when the holidays come and I walk by all that wine and beer and everything, I don't even feel like going, ooh, I wonder what's out there now, or what's the price of this in case I ever drink. It's not there. Yeah, it wasn't. It really wasn't. I don't even think I ever even heard of it. I didn't read books till I was 40. I didn't watch TV and stuff until in my 40s. And that's the truth. The last time I watched TV and all of that was when I lived with my dad from the age of 10 to 14 with my sister. And we'd watch Little House on the Prairie and Emergency. And you know what I mean? Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Oh my gosh. Yes. My kids love those. And frankly, so do I. That's the other thing. I could eat a candy bar every few months, if that. Like, had to have something sweet. Now, I want a little sweet something, anything, a piece of candy, a piece of chocolate, a little bit of ice cream, something every time I'm like done eating now. It's weird how our taste buds change, and in my 20s I could eat one of those entire grinders, those hero sandwiches, a great big one, and not feel half sick. Now I take like 5, 6 bites of a sandwich and I start to feel full, even if it's pizza or macaroni and cheese or anything. And my daughter's like, how can you be full already? I'm like, I don't know. My stomach is just feeling full. I think it's an age thing, you guys. I don't know if your stomach shrinks. I don't know, but I know your metabolism slows down. Maybe that's part of it. But, and then other things. And never like tomatoes or avocados or olives. Oh my gosh, those are my 3 favorite things now. And I used to semi like cheese. I love cheese. Cheese is my favorite food, without a doubt. Cheese, any kind of cheese. But yeah, Yeah. And, I've said this before, cheesecake. I mean, there's all kinds out there. There's peanut butter cheesecake, there's caramel, there's berries, there's plain. Even plain is good. I'll take a sliver, vow I'm not going to go back, and I go back and take one more little sliver, and then one more little sliver, and one more little sliver before you know it. And they're small. The ones you can buy at the store, they're small. Half the pie's gone. Or cake. Well, it's in a pie thing, but it's cheesecake. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me. Gosh, it's just really, really nice. You ladies are so sweet. People watching from the bushes, thank you. Pumpkin cheesecake is delish. Yeah, yeah. Um, but this story is fun, and it's making me wonder. Remember, it was written in 1996. That's a while back, but I know without a doubt this writer is really she's really hitting on what people go through today and what they think. I'm sure of it because it's kind of all the same. Alcoholism is just a real mind fuck. I know I'm saying the F word here quite a bit, but it is, you guys. It's just as much of a physical disease as a mental and spiritual disease. And I almost forgot, and I'm so glad I didn't. I want to read out of my Courage to Change book. And I had the page all set so I would be prepared. It's all crinkly because it got wet or what? Today's January 6th. This is from A Courage to Change for Al-Anon. People that are dealing with alcoholics have friends, or live with them, or relatives, or whatever, acquaintances. How you can detach with love. So this little book, January 6th, and there's meetings out there called Al-Anon. And they're the same principles and format as Alcoholics Anonymous, for those of you that don't know about it. Between meetings, I need to keep in close touch with other Al-Anon members by telephone. Like many who have been affected by alcoholism, when I came into the program, I was tremendously overburdened. Lots of patient listening at the other end of the line continues to help me get those burdens off my chest. Sharing Al-Anon recovery by telephone allows me to reach out to someone else for support. The person I am talking to is not my counselor, confessor, or problem solver, nor is he or she obliged to sit and listen to all my sob stories. Instead, this person may help me reason things out. Sometimes I'll be reminded of an Al-Anon idea or tool that will enable me to gain some perspective on my situation. I am not given advice about what I should or should not do. That is for me to decide. By the time the conversation is over, I've usually found some relief from the problem that had seemed so enormous while it stayed trapped inside my head. Today's reminder: it is my responsibility to solve my own problems with the help of the God of my understanding. Since God often speaks through other people, when I reach out and make an Al-Anon call, I become willing to receive that help. And then this little saying at the end is by William Ernest Hawking. We cannot climb up a rope that is attached only to our own belt. Okay. All right. I know all this cheesecake talk, but my son is no longer on the keto diet. He was getting all kind of upset, asking when food would be, and he's off it. But it's not even really because of me doing a live and making him wait, an extra hour. It's not even that. It was just too hard for him. It was too hard eating those same tortillas. Now he could have chicken, right? But it's got to be the unbreaded kind. He doesn't like that, and he doesn't eat many vegetables. So there wasn't a lot of stuff for him to fill up on. But yeah, within the second day, he bowed out. So I have decided, and I've told him, I'm not buying any more crappy food. I'm not. I'm not buying chips. I'm not buying any chocolate bars or ice cream. Maybe a little ice cream this summer, some popsicles, but I'm not making sure that that stuff's all available all the time, because honestly, we all like it, but we all don't need it. And yeah, so the apples are back in the fridge, and there's mostly that stuff for him until I can get to the store again. Yeah, well, on the keto diet, he couldn't have apples or carrots or, potatoes, um, because it had natural sugar in it. But now he can. Oh, tiramisu from Olive Garden. I found at Gordon's Food. I bought a pan which is restaurant size. Oh, God, that sounds so good. I really want to go. Yeah, I've been to one time. One time my whole life is a do I want to say Indian or Thai restaurant. I just love all that spicy hot curry and all that. And it's probably why Mexican food is my favorite. I love a good taco salad. I think I'm hungry right now. It's 7:34. I started 2 hours ago and I haven't really had dinner yet. But thanks for listening to the JVNA with me, the little dancing quips, and listening to this book. Again, I hope it resonates with someone and they reach out for help, either to Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon. And there's many people. This is what I saw in the meetings that I went to all those years. They have no way to get there. Some of them are wheelchair bound and whatnot. And I'm telling you, call them up anyway. And if there's a will, there is a way. They'll get you there. They'll pick you up. They'll do whatever, because that is part of the triangle. What is it? Now I can't remember. Recovery on one side. Oh, you guys, I can't remember. I'd have to look at my coin. But lettuce works good to wrap too. Yes. Wraps are so yummy. Oh, did you? Well, I don't know what tiramisu is. Now I've heard of it. Is that spicy kind of rice stuff? Not rice. What's that other word that it looks like rice, but it's not? Pour the ends of the coffee pots in a bucket. Wow. Okay, what is tiramisu? Because I thought I bought a box of it and made it once. Is that something different? Oh, couscous. Does that have couscous? And then is the tiramisu goes on the couscous? I don't know. All right. Well, you guys can put that in chat if you want. I'm going to go. It's been 2 hours. Oh, I think it's some kind of cake made with coffee. Oh, okay. What am I thinking of? I don't know. I got to charge my iPad too. It's down to 9%. It has layers and cookies on the side. Oh, Lord. Oh. Oh. Wow. Look at all you sweet ladies hanging out with me. I'd be talking to myself and I'd be here by myself. I so appreciate all of you so, so much. Please hit the like, you guys, and anyone that watches this later on, give me some likes. It helps with the algorithm. And prescribe to me if you're willing to. I'm reaching 3,000, and we will, I don't know, we'll celebrate in some way when I reach it. So I love you guys, and God willing, I will be here tomorrow with chapter 3 called Destiny. All right, bye for now. Be safe, everyone.